Friends, what happened when a mother gave her daughter a tickle punishment for not doing house chores? And then what happened to that girl? Everyone was shocked after seeing it. So this video is going to be really exciting. That's why you must watch it till the end. Elizabeth was an ordinary working mother who lived in an old Victorian-style house with her husband David and their 7-year-old daughter Clara. They had gotten the house for a very low price because it was in the old part of the city, and the previous owner had sold it in a hurry. Elizabeth loved the wooden stairs, the faint creaking sound they made, and the breeze that rustled in through the open windows. David thought it was a good investment, and Clara felt it was like a fairy tale castle. But that afternoon, the fairy tale turned into a nightmare. Clara never liked doing little house chores. She often resisted cleaning her room or picking up her toys. That afternoon, Elizabeth entered the kitchen and found Clara had once again scattered her toys all over the floor after breakfast and refused to clean up. Elizabeth first explained lovingly, then a little more firmly. When Clara still wouldn't budge, Elizabeth smiled and said, "If you don't do the work, you'll get a very special punishment." Clara asked nervously, "What punishment?" Elizabeth said, "A tickle punishment." Clara wasn't afraid of her mother. She actually liked this game. She sat down on the floor and begged her mom to tickle her. Elizabeth bent down and placed her fingers on Clara's thin waist. Clara burst into loud laughter, her giggles echoing through the air. Elizabeth tickled her more, and Clara's laughter turned into a wild, manic laugh. Elizabeth laughed too, thinking it was just a funny punishment. But within moments, she felt Clara's laughter becoming too loud and strangely unnatural. There was less joy in it and more frenzy. Elizabeth pulled her hands away. Suddenly the laughter stopped. Clara, still lying on the floor, opened her eyes, and there was a strange gleam in them. Elizabeth asked, "What happened, sweetheart?" Clara didn't reply. She only looked at Elizabeth with a quiet, mysterious smile. Elizabeth called her over, but Clara just ran to her room. Elizabeth thought maybe she was just upset. She finished her chores and went upstairs. Clara was sitting quietly on the bed. Elizabeth apologized and hugged her tightly. Clara hugged back, but that loud, strange echo of laughter still rang in Elizabeth's ears. That night, Elizabeth, half asleep, heard laughter coming from Clara's room. It was the same laughter, but without any happiness. Elizabeth rushed to Clara's room. Clara was lying peacefully in bed, fast asleep, but the sound of laughter was still there. Elizabeth opened the window, looked outside into the wind, but nothing was there. She went back to bed, convincing herself it was only her imagination. Over the next few days, Clara's behavior completely changed. She no longer talked the way she used to. She would just stare at Elizabeth and sometimes suddenly burst out laughing. But that laugh wasn't Clara's. Elizabeth felt it was someone else's laugh coming out of Clara's throat. David told Elizabeth she was just imagining things due to work stress, that Clara was only acting a little strange, nothing more. But Elizabeth was now certain. Something was very wrong. One day, while cleaning Clara's room, Elizabeth found an old, dusty locket under the bed. It was made of brass and held a very old, faded photograph inside. It was a little girl who looked strikingly like Clara. Beneath the photo, something was faintly written in pencil, nearly erased, but Elizabeth could make out a few words. Lillian, 1898. Elizabeth's heart skipped a beat. Without telling anyone, she started researching the history of the house. She spent hours on the internet and in the city's old library. Soon she discovered the house had a dark past. Over 100 years ago, a family had lived there with a daughter named Lillian. One day, her mother punished her for not doing chores. The punishment was a long, merciless tickling session. After that day, Lillian never spoke another word. She only laughed. Her laughter slowly faded, until one night, she mysteriously vanished. When Elizabeth read this, her body went cold. She knew Lillian had never truly left the house. She was still there, and now she was inside Clara's body. Clara's laughter was Lillian's laughter. That night, Clara's behavior reached its peak. She ran through the house with that strange laughter, echoing everywhere. She laughed just like she had the day Elizabeth first tickled her, but now the laughter would never stop. Clara's eyes had turned black, and she laughed while staring at her mother. Elizabeth screamed Clara's name, but Clara gave no reply. Instead, Clara pointed toward the wall. Elizabeth saw something written there in tiny letters. It was Lillian's mother's message. "My dear Lillian, you can only be freed by your laughter." Elizabeth now understood what she had to do. She had to tickle Lillian the same way she once had, but this time, Clara's laughter needed to hold not joy, but pain. Elizabeth used all her strength and began tickling Clara again. Clara laughed louder and louder, but this time Elizabeth felt the laughter carried deep agony. Clara laughed while tears rolled down her face. Elizabeth kept going, determined to drive Lillian out of her daughter's body forever. Lillian's laughter grew sharper and sharper, until suddenly it stopped. Clara collapsed to the floor. Elizabeth lifted her in her arms and hugged her tightly. Slowly, Clara opened her eyes, and her innocence had returned. Elizabeth asked, "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Clara whispered softly, "Yes, Mom." A deep, eerie silence spread across the house. Elizabeth looked out the window and still heard Clara's laughter echoing. But this time, it held no pain, only a strange sweetness. Elizabeth realized Lillian was gone, but her laughter had been trapped in the house forever. For the next several days, everything seemed normal. Clara was playful and mischievous again. She laughed once more, but now her laughter carried a strange melody. As if each time she laughed, a faint echo lingered in the air. At first, Elizabeth ignored it, but gradually the echo grew louder. Not just at night, but even in daylight. One afternoon when David was home, he suddenly heard laughter coming from the kitchen. He asked Elizabeth, "Where's Clara?" Elizabeth said, "She's outside in the garden." But the laughter was clearly coming from the kitchen. David looked through the window. Clara really was outside playing, her laughter mixing with the fresh air. But inside the kitchen, a thin, eerie laugh seeped from the wall. David's face went pale. He now realized Elizabeth had been right. The laughter was no longer just a sound. The walls felt damp where the laughter seeped through. A cold breeze swept across the wooden stairs, carrying with it the faint echo of Lillian's tickling laughter. One night, the laughter grew so loud that David and Elizabeth rushed into Clara's room in fear. The laughter was coming from inside the walls, as if the house itself was laughing. Clara woke up, terror in her eyes. Elizabeth placed her hand on the wall where the laughter was loudest and felt it, freezing cold, radiating strange energy. Suddenly, a crack split open. David, terrified, pulled Clara into his arms. Slowly, words began to form on the wall, written in blood this time. Lillian's rage. "You will never free me, Mother." Elizabeth and David stared at each other in horror. They knew now they weren't just fighting one spirit, but a force that had spread throughout the entire house. And that laughter, which once was just Lillian's punishment, had now become their punishment too. And this is where the video ends. If you liked the video, please like it and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.